I wasn't supposed to be home until tomorrow. The training at Fort Liberty ended early, so I drove through the night to surprise Clara and little Mason. I didn't call. I just wanted to walk through my own front door and see my sister's face light up. But the moment I turned onto my street, I knew something was wrong. A black sedan was parked near the curb. Clean, expensive, and completely out of place. I didn't recognize it. I killed the engine and stepped out of the truck. That's when I heard it. Crying, not loud, not dramatic, the kind of crying that comes after someone has been holding everything in for too long. It was coming from inside my house. My chest tightened. I walked up the steps, unlocked the door as quietly as I could, and pushed it open. Clara was on the kitchen floor. Her back was pressed against the cabinets. Her face was blotchy and streaked with mascara. In her right hand, she was still holding a pen. Her fingers were shaking so badly the pen kept tapping against the papers scattered beside her. She looked up when she saw me. Relief flooded her eyes, followed immediately by shame. "Ava," she whispered. But it wasn't Clara who made my blood run cold. It was the two people sitting in my living room like they owned it. Gregory and Margaret Harlan, Clara's in-laws, were on my couch. Gregory had a stack of documents in his lap. Margaret was holding one of my mugs, sipping coffee as if she belonged there. Spread across my coffee table were legal papers, bank forms, and property records. Right on top of everything sat a copy of the deed to my house. My house. The house I bought after 12 years of deployments and missed holidays. For a moment, no one moved. Then Margaret looked up and smiled. "Ava," she said warmly, "you're home early." I didn't answer her. I walked straight to Clara, dropped my bag, and knelt down in front of her. "What did they make you do?" I asked quietly. She couldn't even look at me. Her eyes kept darting toward the living room. That was all the answer I needed. I stood up slowly and turned to face them. Gregory leaned back against my couch like he was in his own living room. "This is a family matter," he said, calm and dismissive. "It doesn't concern you." I stared at him. Then I reached behind me and slowly closed the front door. The sound of the latch clicking shut felt final. I looked at the documents on my table. I looked at the deed with my name on it. I looked at my sister still sitting on the floor, gripping that pen like she had almost used it. And then I looked back at Gregory. These people had walked into my house, sat on my furniture, and tried to pressure my sister into signing away something that didn't belong to them. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Gregory must have seen something in my face because his confident expression flickered for the first time. I took one step forward. "Clara," I said without looking away from him, "go upstairs and pack a bag for you and Mason. Now." My voice was quiet. Too quiet. Margaret set my mug down carefully. Gregory's jaw tightened. Clara didn't move right away. She looked between me and her father-in-law like she was still trapped between two worlds. Then she slowly pushed herself up from the floor. That small movement seemed to break something in Gregory. He sat up straighter. "Now, hold on." I cut him off. "You're going to leave my house," I said, "and you're going to do it before I decide to call the police." The room went silent. Margaret's fake warmth disappeared. Gregory's face hardened. But I wasn't finished. I looked him dead in the eyes and added, "And if you ever try to use my nephew as leverage again, you're going to wish you never stepped foot in this house." For the first time since I walked through the door, Gregory Harlan looked uncertain. He had made a mistake. He just didn't know how big of a mistake it was yet. The moment the front door closed behind Gregory and Margaret, Clara collapsed onto the couch like her legs could no longer hold her up. She covered her face with both hands and started crying again, this time without trying to stay quiet. Mason was still asleep upstairs, completely unaware of what had just happened in his own home. I sat down beside her and waited. I didn't rush her. I just let her cry. After a while, she wiped her face with the sleeve of her sweater and looked at me. I almost signed it, she whispered. Before you came home, I was holding the pen. Margaret kept saying if I didn't do it, Ethan would lose everything. She said Mason would grow up hating me. I stayed quiet and let her keep talking. They've been doing this for months, Clara said, her voice shaking. At first, it was just questions. How much is Ava's house worth? Does she have a mortgage? Is she deployed a lot? I thought they were just being nosy. She let out a bitter laugh. Then it got worse. Gregory started saying his company was in trouble. He needed help. He told Ethan that if the business collapsed, it would be my fault for not supporting the family. Margaret kept telling me I was being selfish, that I was tearing Ethan apart. Clara looked down at her hands. She said I was just like Mom, that I was too emotional, that I always made things harder than they needed to be. After a while, I started believing her. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Margaret hadn't just pressured Clara. She had spent months breaking her down, making her doubt her own mind. That explained why Clara had looked so lost and exhausted these past few months. They started saying the only way to save Ethan's company was to use your house as collateral, Clara continued. Gregory said it would be temporary. He said since I was living here, it would be easy to structure the paperwork. He kept saying you would understand once everything was done. She looked at me, eyes red and swollen. I told them no, over and over, but they wouldn't stop. Every day there were new messages, new calls. Margaret would cry on the phone and say Ethan was under so much stress. She said if I really loved him, I would do this one thing. Clara's voice dropped lower. 2 days ago, Gregory came here with new documents. He said this was the final version. He said if I signed, everything would be fixed. Ethan wouldn't have to worry anymore. Mason wouldn't have to grow up in a broken family. She swallowed hard. I almost did it. I was so tired, Ava. I haven't slept properly in weeks. I kept thinking, maybe if I just signed, it would all stop. Maybe I could finally breathe again. She looked at me with shame in her eyes. I was holding the pen when you walked in. The room fell silent. I reached over and took her hand. It was ice cold. You didn't sign, I said firmly. That's what matters. Clara shook her head. But I wanted to. That's the worst part. For a few seconds, I actually wanted to sign those papers just so they would leave me alone. I squeezed her hand. They've been doing this to you for a long time, I said. This isn't your fault. She didn't answer right away. She just stared at the floor like she was still trying to understand how she had gotten to this point. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. They already submitted some of the documents. I turned to look at her. What? Clara nodded slowly. Gregory told me this morning. He said he sent in a preliminary package using my name. He said the bank already started reviewing it. That's why he was so confident today. He thought even if you came home, it would be too late. She looked at me with fear in her eyes. Ava, what if they already did something? What if it's already started? I felt my jaw tighten. All this time, Gregory and Margaret hadn't just been pressuring Clara inside my house. They had been moving behind the scenes, trying to lock everything in before I could stop them. I stood up and walked over to the window. Outside, the street was quiet. The black sedan was gone, but the damage they had tried to cause was still hanging over us. I turned back to Clara. Listen to me, I said. We're not going to let them win. Not this time. Clara looked up at me, exhausted but listening. I pulled out my phone. I'm calling someone who can help us figure out exactly what they've already done, I said. And then we're going to make sure they regret ever thinking they could use you to steal from me. Clara wiped her face and nodded. For the first time since I walked through the door, she looked like she was ready to fight back. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Gregory Harlan had already made his first move. Now it was my turn. After I ended the call with Mark, I walked back into the living room. Clara was still sitting on the couch, staring at the stack of papers Gregory had left behind. I sat down across from her and pulled the documents toward me. One by one, I flipped through them. Loan applications, property authorization forms, a power of attorney document with Clara's name already typed in, and at the very back, a declaration claiming she had full authority to act on my behalf regarding this house. None of it had my signature. None of it had my permission. Clara watched me quietly. They kept saying it was just paperwork, she said softly, that it wouldn't actually mean anything until you signed too. But the way Gregory talked, it felt like they were already planning to use it. I didn't answer right away. I was too busy reading. The more I looked, the clearer it became. This wasn't some desperate last-minute idea. These documents were carefully prepared. Someone had spent time on them. Someone had planned this. I looked up at Clara. How long have they been pushing you like this? She hesitated. Since the beginning of last month, she admitted. At first it was just conversations. Then Gregory started bringing papers every time he came over. Margaret would sit with me for hours, going through every line, telling me how much easier everything would be if I just cooperated. Clara's voice grew smaller. She said if I didn't help, Ethan might blame me for the rest of our lives. She said a good wife would do whatever it takes to protect her family. I felt my jaw tighten. I had known Gregory and Margaret were controlling. I just didn't realize how far they were willing to go. I gathered the papers into a neat stack and stood up. Pack a bag, I said. For you and Mason. Enough for a few days. Clara looked up, surprised. What? Where are we going? You're not staying here tonight, I told her. Not while they think they can still pressure you. She didn't move. Ava, I don't want to run from them. I stopped and looked at her. I'm not asking you to run, I said. I'm asking you to stop letting them decide how scared you're allowed to be. Clara stared at me for a long moment. Then something shifted in her expression. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was small, but it was there. She stood up. Without saying another word, she walked upstairs to the guest room. I heard her moving around, opening drawers, packing clothes. A few minutes later, she came back down carrying a duffel bag in one hand and Mason's diaper bag in the other. Mason was awake now, resting against her shoulder, still half asleep. She looked at me and nodded once. I'm ready. I grabbed my keys. We were halfway to the door when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Gregory. I opened it. Gregory, you're making this harder than it needs to be. Clara knows what's best for her family. Don't turn her against us. I stared at the message for a second. Then I typed back slowly. Me. If you ever contact my sister again without going through me first, I will make sure the next conversation happens with the police present. I hit send. Clara saw the look on my face. What did he say? Nothing important, I answered. Get in the truck. We stepped outside. I locked the door behind us and walked Clara and Mason to my truck. As I was putting Mason's car seat in, Clara suddenly spoke. Ava. I turned around. She was standing on the driveway, holding Mason against her chest. Her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. I'm done letting them make me feel like I'm the problem, she said. I don't know what we're going to do next. But I'm not signing anything. Not for them. Not anymore. I looked at her for a moment, then gave her a small nod. Good. We got into the truck. As I pulled out of the driveway, I glanced at Clara in the passenger seat. She was staring out the window, one hand resting protectively on Mason's leg. For the first time in a long time, she didn't look afraid. She looked tired. But she also looked like someone who had finally decided she was done being controlled. My phone buzzed again on the center console. Another message from Gregory. I didn't open it. Whatever he had to say, it didn't matter anymore. He had already crossed the line, and now I was going to make sure he understood exactly what that meant. We drove in silence for a while. Mason had fallen back asleep in his car seat, and Clara kept her eyes on the road ahead, lost in her own thoughts. I didn't push her to talk. She had already said enough for one night. I checked us into a hotel about 20 minutes away from my house. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean. quiet, and most importantly, it wasn't mine. Gregory and Margaret didn't know where we were, and right now, that mattered more than comfort. After I got Clara and Mason settled in the room, I stepped outside into the hallway and called Mark Ellison. He answered on the second ring. "Mark," I said, "I need your help." I told him everything, from walking in on Gregory and Margaret in my living room, to the documents on the table, to Clara almost signing, and finally, the fact that Gregory had already submitted paperwork using her name. Mark was quiet for a few seconds after I finished. "Ava," he said carefully, "this isn't just family drama anymore. What you're describing sounds like attempted mortgage fraud. If they submitted documents claiming Clara had authority over your property without your knowledge, that's a serious crime." I leaned against the wall. "What should I do?" "Don't confront them yet," he said, not directly. "If they know you're building a case, they might try to cover their tracks. Document everything, save every text, every email, every voicemail. And Ava, whatever you do, don't sign anything, not even to help Clara." "I wasn't planning to," I said. After I hung up, I stood in the hallway for a moment, thinking. Mark was right. Going after Gregory with anger would only give him something to use against us later. I needed to be smarter than that. I went back inside the room. Clara was sitting on the edge of the bed, gently rocking Mason, even though he was already asleep. She looked exhausted. I sat down across from her. "Mark thinks they've already committed fraud," I told her. "Even if nothing went through yet." Clara nodded slowly, like she had already suspected it. "I should have told you sooner," she said quietly. "I kept thinking I could handle it. That if I just kept saying no, they would eventually stop." "They weren't going to stop," I said. "People like them don't stop until someone makes them." Clara looked at me. "What are we going to do now?" I leaned forward, resting my arms on my knees. "We're going to let Gregory believe he still has a chance," I said. "We're going to keep talking to him. We're going to act like we're considering it, and while we do that, we're going to collect every single piece of evidence we can." Clara frowned. "You want to play along?" "I want to trap him," I corrected. "Right now, he thinks he's in control. That's his weakness. If we take that away from him too quickly, he might get desperate. Desperate people make mistakes." She was quiet for a long time. Then she asked the question I knew had been weighing on her. "What about Ethan?" I didn't have a good answer. "I don't know yet," I said honestly. "But we'll find out soon enough." Clara nodded. She didn't push for more. Later that night, after Mason was asleep in the portable crib the hotel had provided, Clara and I sat at the small table by the window. The only light in the room came from the lamp between us. She looked smaller than usual, tired in a way that went deeper than just lack of sleep. "I keep thinking about how easy it almost was," she said. "If you hadn't come home early, I think I would have signed." I didn't try to comfort her with lies. "You didn't," I said. "That's what matters now." She gave me a small, sad smile. "You always make things sound so simple." I shook my head. "It's not simple, but it's clear. They tried to use you to steal from me, and now they're going to answer for it." My phone lit up on the table. A new email. From Gregory. Clara and I looked at each other. I opened it. The message was long and carefully worded. He was apologizing for the misunderstanding earlier. He said he still wanted to resolve things peacefully. He suggested we all meet at the lender's office on Friday morning at 10 to clear everything up and finalize the paperwork. At the bottom, he added one last line. "I hope you'll do what's best for the family, Ava." I read it twice before putting the phone down. Clara was watching me. "What does he want?" she asked. I looked at her. "He wants to meet on Friday," I said. "At the lender's office." Clara's face went pale. "Are you going to go?" I leaned back in my chair and looked out the window at the dark parking lot. No, I said quietly. We're both going. Clara blinked. Together? I nodded. If Gregory wants to play this game in front of other people, then we're going to let him. But this time, we're not going in unprepared. I picked up my phone again and forwarded the email to Mark. Then I looked back at Clara. Get some sleep, I told her. Tomorrow, we start fighting back. The next 3 days moved slowly, but I kept us busy. Every morning, I woke up before Clara and checked my phone. Gregory had sent 2 more emails since the first one. His tone was getting more confident with each message. He talked about resolving things as a family and how everyone would benefit if we just sat down and talked like adults. He had no idea we were documenting everything. Mark had advised us to keep the conversation going without agreeing to anything, so that's what we did. I replied to Gregory's emails with short, neutral messages. I asked questions, I made him explain things in writing. Every time he answered, he gave us more rope to hang him with. Clara watched me do it and stayed quiet most of the time. On Wednesday night, she finally asked the question that had clearly been bothering her. What if Ethan shows up on Friday? She said. We were sitting at the small hotel table again. Mason was asleep in the crib. I looked at her. Then he shows up, I said, and he sees exactly what his parents have been doing. Clara lowered her eyes. I still don't know what to say to him, she admitted. Part of me is angry, but another part, I don't know. He's still Mason's father. I didn't rush to give her an answer. You don't have to decide everything right now, I told her. Just focus on getting through Friday, one thing at a time. She nodded, but I could tell she was still carrying a lot of weight. By Thursday afternoon, Gregory's messages had become more frequent. He was getting impatient. He kept asking if we were still coming to the meeting. I could almost feel his desperation through the screen. That night, Clara and I went over everything one more time. We laid out all the documents on the hotel bed, the ones Gregory had left at my house, the emails, the text messages, and the photos I had taken that first day. Mark had also sent over a list of what to watch out for during the meeting. Clara stared at the papers for a long time. I can't believe how much they prepared, she said quietly. It's like they really thought this would work. They did think it would work, I said. That's why they're going to lose. She looked at me. You're not scared at all, are you? I thought about it before answering. I'm not scared, I said, but I am angry, and I've learned to use that anger carefully. Clara gave me a small smile. I wish I could be more like you. You don't need to be like me, I told her. You just need to be honest. That's enough. Friday morning came faster than I expected. We woke up early, got dressed, and packed Mason's things. Neither of us ate much breakfast. The tension in the room was thick, but it wasn't the same kind of fear Clara had carried before. This time, it felt more like nervous energy. Before we left the hotel, Clara stopped me at the door. Ava, she said. I turned around. She looked nervous, but her voice was steady. I want to go in first, she said. When we get there, I want to walk in before you. I studied her face. Why? Because I need them to see that I'm not hiding behind you, she said. I need to do this for myself. I nodded slowly. Okay, I said. But I'll be right behind you. She took a deep breath and nodded back. We drove to the lending office in silence. Mason was with a trusted neighbor from my street, someone I knew would keep him safe while we handled this. As we pulled into the parking lot, I saw Gregory's car already there. Clara stared at it for a few seconds, then unbuckled her seatbelt. I reached over and squeezed her hand once. You ready? I asked. She looked at me and gave a small, determined nod. As ready as I'll ever be. We got out of the truck and walked toward the building together. Just before we reached the entrance, Clara stopped and looked at me one last time. No matter what happens in there, she said, thank you for coming home early. for not letting them win. I gave her a small smile. We're not done yet, I said. Let's go finish this. Clara pushed open the glass door and stepped inside. I followed right behind her. Neither of us knew exactly what was waiting for us on the other side, but we both knew one thing for certain. Gregory Harlan was about to find out that he had made the biggest mistake of his life. The conference room was too bright and too quiet at the same time. Gregory, Margaret, and Ethan were already sitting at the long table when we walked in. Gregory stood up immediately with a wide, polished smile, like this was just another business meeting. Ava, Clara, he said warmly. Thank you for coming. Please, sit down. Clara walked in first, just like she said she would. I followed behind her. We took the 2 seats across from them. Ethan couldn't look at Clara. He kept his eyes on the table. Margaret gave us a soft, concerned smile, the same one she had used on Clara for months. Gregory launched into his speech right away. He talked about temporary difficulties, family support, and how everyone could benefit if we just worked together. He sounded calm and reasonable, like he was doing us a favor. I let him talk. After almost 20 minutes, he finally slid a folder across the table toward me. Everything is ready, he said. If we sign today, the funds can be released quickly. I didn't touch the folder. Instead, I opened my own bag and took out a stack of papers. I placed them on the table one by one. Photos of the documents they had left in my house, printed emails, text message screenshots, and camera footage from my security system. Gregory's smile slowly faded. What is this? He asked. I looked him straight in the eye. This is the truth, I said, and we're going to go through it together. The room went quiet. I started with the first day. I showed them the photos I had taken of the documents on my coffee table. Then I showed the text messages Margaret had sent to Clara, pressuring her for weeks. I played a short clip from my security camera showing Gregory and Margaret walking into my house while I was away. Margaret's face had gone pale. Gregory tried to interrupt. This is unnecessary. I kept going. I showed the email he sent me where he carefully explained how Clara could help with a bridge loan using my house. I showed the revised documents where my name was suddenly spelled correctly on every page. Then I looked at him. You didn't make a mistake, I said. You planned this. Gregory's jaw tightened. For the first time, he looked nervous. Before he could answer, the door to the conference room opened. Mark Ellison walked in, followed by a man in a suit and a woman in a police uniform. The fraud investigator and a detective from the Raleigh Police Department. Gregory's face went completely white. Margaret let out a small, sharp breath. Ethan finally looked up. His eyes were wide with panic. The investigator placed a file on the table and opened it. Mr. Harlan, he said calmly, we've reviewed the documents you submitted to the lender earlier this week. There are several serious discrepancies. He turned a page. One of them appears to contain a forged signature. Gregory opened his mouth, but no words came out. Margaret started shaking her head. This is a misunderstanding, she said quickly. We were just trying to help our son. The detective looked at her without any sympathy. Ma'am, forging documents to obtain a loan is not helping. It's a crime. Ethan suddenly stood up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. Dad, he said, his voice cracking. What did you do? Gregory didn't answer him. He was staring at the investigator like he was watching his entire life fall apart in real time. Clara had been quiet the whole time, but now she slowly stood up as well. She looked directly at Ethan. You knew, she said. Her voice was quiet but clear. You knew what they were doing, and you still let them use me. Ethan looked like he had been slapped. Clara, don't. She cut him off. Don't lie to me anymore. Not here. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. I almost signed those papers because I thought I was protecting our family, she said. But you were willing to destroy everything just to keep them happy. Ethan sat back down heavily. He covered his face with both hands. Gregory finally found his voice. He looked at me with something close to desperation. Ava, we can still work this out. Between us. I stared at him for a long moment. The same man who had sat in my living room and told me this was none of my business. The same man who had tried to use my sister and my nephew as pawns. I shook my head. No, I said. We can't. The investigator started reading more from the file. With every sentence, Gregory seemed to shrink in his chair. Margaret had stopped trying to speak. She just sat there, staring at the table. Clara reached over and took my hand under the table. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was steady. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt like we had finally taken back control. Gregory Harlan had walked into my house thinking he could take whatever he wanted. Now he was sitting in a room full of people who knew exactly what he had done. And there was no way out left for him. We walked out of the lending office without looking back. Clara didn't say anything until we reached the truck. She stopped beside the passenger door and took a long, shaky breath. I thought I would feel relieved, she said quietly, but I just feel empty. I unlocked the truck. Give it time, I told her. You did the right thing today. She nodded, but her eyes were distant. On the drive back, neither of us spoke much. The weight of what had just happened was still settling over us. Gregory and Margaret had been escorted out by the investigator. Ethan had left alone, looking like a man who had lost everything. 2 days later, the investigation officially began. Mark called me with updates almost every day. The more they looked into Gregory's company, the more problems they found. It wasn't just one bad decision. There were years of questionable loans, hidden debts, and falsified records. Within 3 weeks, the company collapsed completely. Clara filed for legal separation at the end of that month. Ethan didn't fight it. He started coming to see Mason regularly, but he never tried to defend what his parents had done. By early autumn, Clara found a small 2-bedroom apartment across town. It wasn't big and it wasn't fancy, but it was hers. The day she got the keys, I helped her move in. We spent the afternoon unpacking boxes while Mason played on the living room floor with his toys. When we were done, Clara stood in the middle of her new kitchen and looked around. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she turned to me and smiled, a real smile, the kind I hadn't seen from her in months. I didn't think I would ever have this again, she said. My own place, my own life. I leaned against the counter. You earned it, I told her. She shook her head. No, she said. You gave me the chance to fight for it. If you hadn't come home early that day. Her voice trailed off. I walked over and pulled her into a hug. You would have found your way eventually, I said. But I'm glad I was there when you needed me. We stood there for a while, just holding each other. Later that evening, after Mason had fallen asleep in his new room, Clara and I sat on her small balcony. The air was cool, and the city lights stretched out in front of us. She looked out at the view and spoke without turning to me. Do you think they'll ever understand what they did? She asked. I thought about Gregory and Margaret, how they had sat in my living room like they had every right to be there, how they had used fear and guilt to control the people around them. I don't know, I said honestly. Some people never do. Clara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I'm just glad it's over. I looked at her. It's not over, I said gently. But the worst part is. She turned to look at me. You're free now, Clara. That's what matters. She gave me a small nod and looked back out at the city. I stayed with her a little longer before driving home. As I pulled into my own driveway, I sat in the truck for a few minutes, looking at my house. It looked the same as it always had, but everything felt different now. They had come into my home thinking they could take whatever they wanted. They thought my house was just another asset they could use. They were wrong. A house isn't valuable because of the money it's worth. It's valuable because of the people it protects. And in the end, that's exactly what I did. I protected my family.